Hi all, Rick here with an entry into my Star Trek Bestiaries, this time looking at the canonically unnamed Neural Parasites that's almost brought the United Federation of Planets to its knees in 2364. This video will focus on the information presented in the shows primarily, but I'll elaborate on some memory beta content that tackles their origin later on. Also, I'm going to borrow a term used in the show, then in apocryphal content when referring to them, that of Bluegills. So, in the episode of TNG called Conspiracy, we are introduced to these parasites. However, an exact origin was never established. What we know of them was from people under their sway. So, who knows the veracity of these statements? They are from well outside of explored Federation space and have a strong desire to take over other cultures. Their goals appeared to be control through subterfuge, and deceit is their first line of defence. Although very capable of defending themselves, once discovered they were not exactly phaser-proof. They attempted to grow their influence in secret, usurping those in positions of power, and then reaching down the chain of command to infect more. The critter itself looked like a small purple insect, with 6 clawed legs, a large set of mandibles, and a piercing tail. That's too much spiky for such a little creature. It was around 12 centimetres long and perfectly able to scuttle and climb on its own. What made them horrifying, however, was the fact that they spent the majority of their time inside another being, treating it as a host. It would enter through the mouth of a humanoid and make its way to the brainstem, which, can I just point out, means going through the thin layers of skin and muscle between the back of the mouth and the spine? I guess that's what those mandibles are for. Moving swiftly on. The parasite then clasps onto the spine around the C2 to C6 next vertebrae with its claws, grips the base of the skull with its pincers, and then pokes its tail through the skin out the back of the neck. This tail is actually a gill that allows the creatures to breathe while within the host, and its visibility the only outward sign of an infected organism. From there it would extend its tendrils into the nervous system and the brainstem to assume direct control of the host, taking over its bodily functions completely. While infected, a humanoid host was empowered with a range of abilities, all derived from the neural parasite overriding the body's natural limiting factors. It could hyperstimulate the adrenal gland, for example, allowing for a dangerous level of physical exertion from the host, displaying feats of strength and endurance that are typically reserved for a fight-or-flight situation. As they had complete control of the nervous system, stuns also had little effect on them. One weakness of the parasite is that it had no way to access the long-term memories of its host, so it could not completely mimic its host's behaviour. Instead, it would often improvise its way through encounters if needed. They also developed a taste for insects as food, perhaps suggesting their typical diet outside of a host body. If the host dies or is otherwise incapacitated, the bluegill will attempt to flee the victim, killing the host. The Federation also encountered the mother creature of these beings, of larger and differing form from its offspring. The mother creature also inhabited a body, but to a much greater extent, living within the entire abdomen of the infected host, along with more of its offspring. Here's a picture of a puppy for you to cleanse your brain. Okay, back to it. The mother creature had what appeared to be a chitin shell and was much larger from what was seen, over a foot in length, but it would remain coiled up within its victim. It controlled the offspring through a telepathic link, and if it was killed, its offspring perished within minutes. It's a fairly well-known behind-the-scenes fact that these were intended to replace the Borg as the mysterious threat that had been troubling Starfleet and the Romulans, but then the concept of the Borg was developed, and the role the Bluegills would have fulfilled was assimilated by the Borg. As a result, this left them as an open-ended plot, which made them into a more terrifying presence, as they may still be out there. As I mentioned, several other sources took on the mystery of explaining them, but this is all non-canonical material from now on. It's alluded to that the process of possession, whether from a regular parasite or a mother creature, is eventually fatal to the victim due to the strain on the body that the parasite demands. Further, it's revealed that the mother and spawn forms of the bluegill are not the only ones. The spawn mother creature, like her progeny, was capable of exiting the host and moving by itself, which it would attempt to do if and when the host perished. These were capable of growing substantially in size over time to increase the yield of their colony, but doing so would noticeably violate any subterfuge. Some of the bluegills adopted other forms, such as the Delver and Ravager, which were several feet in length and possessed a definite shell for protection. They also developed much larger forelegs which could be used for both slashing and tunnelling through dirt to ambush or escape. It's unknown how they achieved these larger forms, but I suspect they used up their host to grow. As for their origin, we have two similar stories. One source of DS9 books mentions that they used the same isoboromin neural transmitter as Trill symbionts, which clues us into their origin as a malevolent offshoot of that species. Basically, a far-flung colony of Trills was afflicted by a deadly virus and began to genetically modify the symbionts to survive it, but also learned how to improve the joining. However, the mutated symbionts went mad and evolved into the bluegill culture we see in TNG. The other storyline has them similarly genetic creations, maybe of symbionts too, but this time created by the Solanae on behalf of the Iconians. The goal was to soften up the Milky Way species for invasion by compromising their ranks and recruiting loyal servitors to the Iconian cause. Either origin proposes that the bluegills are not natural creations, and their suitability at taking over the humanoid form might lend some support to this. The one addendum I would make is that when possessing a host and in contact with a spawn mother, the creatures were as intelligent as any spacefaring sentient being, but I suspect that this is due to their telepathic hive mind coupled with the access to the host's brain. But that's speculation, as the intelligence of a single parasite was never really tested. Picard didn't really have time to make them take an IQ test when he was uncovering their infiltration. Thanks for watching this video on the neural parasites of Star Trek. Personally, I don't think they need an origin, but I would like Starfleet to have to deal with their re-emergence at some point. I think it would make for a cool story arc. So until next video, thanks for watching. I've been Rick and I'll see you next time. Goodbyes.